Isaac Nightingall's fingers, cold and slick with tunnel condensation, pressed the mic against the cracked tile wall. The static hissed like a dying wire, a white noise that sometimes coalesced into whispers. And the sigh was the third thing, he began, his voice thin against the damp stone, the words swallowed before they could form. The air tasted of wet concrete and ozone, a storm trapped indoors. He shifted his weight, the worn soles of his boots, scraping against the gritty mud coating the tunnel floor. Then he saw it. Footprints, not his. Not the scattered, hesitant prints of a single person, but a dense, overlapping pattern, as if dozens had stood here, breathing, shifting, void knowing. The mud was thick, cold, holding every step like a fossil. He kicked a crumpled tram ticket into the blackness. It landed with a soft tug and plink against unseen stone, the sound swallowed instantly. The static surged, sharp and electric, then resolved into a single clear word, thud and sigh. It vibrated in his molars. He spun, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, scanning the impenetrable dark. Too many, always too many. His breath fogged the air, a brief, futile steam in the suffocating cold. He fumbled for his phone, no signal, just the dead glow of the screen, then remembered the ceramic bowl he tucked into his bag. A foolish precaution, a relic from his childhood, now a useless weight. He pulled it out, the cool porcelain a stark contrast to the tunnel's grime. The bowl was empty. He set it down on a dry patch of tile. Then, the mud beneath it rippled. Not water, but thick, dark earth rising like a slow tide. The bowl erupted upward, not from the ground, but to the through. It the ceramic shattering on impact, boiling water, thick and opaque as dirty milk. Geysered upwards, splashing the tile with scalding droplets that hissed like steam on a hot plate. The bowl itself, now half submerged in the mud, overflowed violently, the water churning with unseen force. Isaac stumbled back, the rough tile scraping his palms. The water surged, not towards him, but Toby upward, forming a swirling vortex in the tunnel's low ceiling. His foot caught on a loose tile. He tried to pull it free, but the mud beneath the bowl's rim was suddenly alive, sucking. The water sloshed over the edge of the bowl, cold despite the steam, and lapped at his ankle. It tasted of rusted bolts and old blood, a metallic tang that coated his tongue. The purr began then, not from a cat, but from the floorboards themselves, a deep, resonant thrumming that vibrated up through his bones, shaking the tunnel's very foundation. It wasn't a sound he heard. It was a physical pressure, a low-frequency pulse sinking with the frantic hammering in his chest. The water in the bowl churned, the surface reflecting no light, only the distorted pastel nightmare of the tunnel walls. Pale pink tiles streaked with mint-green mold, baby blue puddles reflecting nothing. The purr intensified, a physical force now vibrating the bowl, vibrating Fudden hymned. The mud around the bowl's base pulsed, the water rising faster, lapping higher. His ankle felt the chill of the boiling water, the rusted taste sharp on his tongue. He kicked again, hard, the movement clumsy, desperate. The mud yielded, but only to pull him deeper. The water surged over his ankle, a sudden shocking cold that burned, tasting of iron and forgotten places. The purr became a constant, deep thrumming in his teeth, vibrating the air itself, making the static hiss with a new, terrible clarity. He could feel the bowl's edge against his heel, the water sloshing up his calf, tasting of rusted bolts and the cold unspoken dread of being known. The tunnel darkened further, the shadows stretching not towards him, but toward into the bowl, into the water, into the thrumming floor. His foot sank deeper, the water rising to his knee, the taste of the rusted bolts filling his mouth, the purr vibrating the bones of his foot. The wrench felt heavy, cold against my palm. A dull, insistent thud as I swung it, connecting with the ceramic bowl. Not a shattering blow, more a forceful shove. The water within sloshed violently, a churning gray mass reflecting the sickly pastel of the tunnel walls. It didn't drain. It didn't even seem to recede. It simply reformed. The surface smoothed, the ripples vanishing as if the disruption had never occurred. A slow, deliberate mockery of physics. I tasted bile. The storm smell, thick and cloying, intensified. A damp weight in my lungs. My phone. I fumbled for it, the cold metal a shock against my skin. No signal. Just the dead gray screen reflecting my own distorted face, a pale ghost in the oppressive gloom. A low, guttural purr vibrated through the tunnel, not a sound so much as a pressure against my teeth. It seemed to emanate from the bowl itself, a resonant hum that resonated with the frantic beat of my heart. The screen of my phone flickered, displaying a jumble of static siphene, not the usual white noise but something else, not random. It resolved into fragmented words, distorted and fleeting. Not yours, not yours. The whispers clawed at the edges of my sanity. I backed away, my boots scraping against the slick mud. The air hung heavy, pregnant with the smell of ozone and something else, something indefinable, something funrong. A memory surfaced, unwanted and unwelcome foo. The scent of my grandmother's attic, damp and filled with moth-eaten velvet. A place I hadn't thought of in decades. I kicked a loose stone, the sound swallowed by the tunnel's suffocating silence. Then it materialized, a flicker at the periphery of my vision, a shifting darkness coalescing into form. The cat. Its fur wasn't fur at all, but thick, oily smoke swirling and shifting, obscuring its features. It wasn't black, not precisely. More like the absence of light, a void against the pastel nightmare of the tunnel. It sat, perfectly still, regarding me with eyes that were not eyes at all, but points of concentrated shadow. It began to purr again. The sound now a deliberate jamming signal, distorting the static on my phone screen into a chaotic, illegible mess. The pastel pink and mint green tiles seemed to pulse with an unnatural luminescence. I wanted to run, to flee this place, this oppressive, suffocating darkness. But my legs felt leaden, rooted to the spot. I felt a compulsion, a dreadful certainty that escape was not an option. The bowl. I needed to move it. I needed to. I grabbed the wrench again, the metal cold and unforgiving against my sweating palm. Another swing, more forceful this time. The bowl teetered, threatening to spill its contents, but remained upright. The purring intensified, a physical pressure against my eardrums. The static on my phone crackled, a voice whispering, "Leave it." I ignored it. I had to. With a grunt of effort, I managed to shove the bowl sideways. The water sloshed violently, a grey tide threatening to engulf my feet. But as quickly as it spilled, it returned, flowing back into the bowl as if drawn by an invisible force. It was a mockery, a cruel demonstration of its power. I dropped the wrench. It clattered against the tile floor, then rolled, inexorably, towards the bowl. The water sloshed over the rim, a cold, viscous wave that lapped at my foot. It tasted of rusted bolts and something else, something ancient and indefinable, a taste that clung to the back of my throat. The purring deepened, a resonant hum that vibrated in my bones. I tried to pull my foot away, but it felt stuck. The water rose higher, a slow, deliberate tide. The water was no longer boiling, it had cooled, its surface now a glassy sheen that caught the sickly pastel light of the tunnel. I traced the rim of the bowl with my fingertips, the ceramic rough and cold, the edges worn smooth by something other than time. The water sloshed slightly as I moved, but it didn't spill. It didn't even ripple. It was as if the surface was frozen, a mirror reflecting not my face, but something else, something I couldn't quite see. Then I saw it, a map, faint and ghostly, etched into the bowl's surface. It was a tunnel map, the kind I'd seen on the back of old subway posters, but this one was different. It was wrong. The lines didn't connect the way they should. The stations were named in a language I didn't recognize, but I understood the meaning. Escape. I had to follow it. I had to. I turned, my boots slapping against the slick tiles, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. The tunnel stretched ahead, the walls now a sickly pink, the air thick with the cloying scent of storm. I moved forward, my breath shallow, my pulse a frantic drumbeat in my ears. The cat was still there, watching me, its smoke like fur shifting like oil on water. It didn't move. It didn't need to. It was waiting. I pressed my palm against it, the metal cold and unyielding. It creaked open with a groan that echoed through the tunnel, the sound like a wet rag being dragged across stone. I stepped inside, the air growing colder, the scent of ozone stronger. My phone flickered again, the static resolving into a single word, silence. Silence. The cat was there, blocking the door. Its fur shimmered like something alive, like smoke caught in a windstorm. It began to purr, the sound now a deliberate, mechanical noise like the whirring of gears. I reached for my keychain, the metal cold against my fingers. The cat's purr intensified, a sound that vibrated in my bones, in my teeth, in the very marrow of my being. I tried to move, but my hand wouldn't obey. The keychain was still in my grip, but it was no longer metal. It was smoke dissolving into the air, the chain unraveling like threads of spider silk. I watched in horror as the keychain faded, the metal turning to ash in my hand. My fingers trembled, the skin breaking, a thin line of blood seeping from the wound. The cat's purr stopped. The silence was deafening. My hand bled, the wound searing, the pain sharp and immediate. I looked down, the shard of the keychain still in my palm, the edges jagged and cold. It was like holding a piece of glass, but it was not glass. It was something else, something ancient, something wrong. The cat's fur shimmered like a struck match, like smoke caught in a flame. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't think. I could only feel the blood, the pain, the silence. The room had no door, only a ceiling that sagged like a wound. I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath my weight, the sound like a spine cracking. The air was thick, cloying, and the scent of old perfume clung to the walls, something floral and sour, like a forgotten lover. My boots made no noise, as if the floor had swallowed them. I turned in a slow circle, my breath shallow, my pulse a hollow drumbeat in my ears. The walls were lined with shelves, their surfaces coated in a thin film of dust that glimmered faintly, like the skin of a dead thing. On a pedestal in the center of the room sat a pocket watch, its casing tarnished but still gleaming with the sheen of Edwardian brass. I approached it, my footsteps silent, my hand trembling as I reached out. The watch was cold, the metal smooth against my fingers. I lifted it, the weight of it strange, as if it held more than just gears and springs. I opened it, and the inside was not what I expected. There was no face, no hands, only a swirling mass of something dark and liquid, like smoke trapped in a bottle. It moved, slow and deliberate, as if it were breathing. I tilted the watch, and the liquid inside shifted, forming shapes, faces, eyes, mouths. I dropped it, the sound of the glass shattering like a scream. The room filled with the sound of static, a low, droning hum that vibrated in my teeth. Then, a voice, "Your turn." The words were not spoken, but felt, like a needle pressing into my skin. The cat was there, watching me, its fur a shifting mass of smoke, thick and oily, like something that had been spilled and never cleaned. It didn't move, didn't blink. It simply watched. I looked back at the shattered glass, at the watch's broken casing. The liquid inside had spilled, pooling on the floor in a slow, deliberate motion. It was still moving, still forming shapes, still watching me. I stepped forward, my boots making no sound, my breath shallow. I reached down, my fingers trembling, and touched the liquid. It was cold, but not like the watch. It was like something else, something alive. I pulled my hand back, and the liquid recoiled, forming a shape in the air, a face that looked like mine, but wrong, twisted, familiar. The cat's purr began, low and deliberate, like the turning of gears. I looked at it, then at the broken watch. The liquid in the air shifted again, forming words. "Isaac, we know your voice." The sound of static filled the room, the voice growing louder, more insistent, until I could hear it clearly. I could hear my own voice, but it wasn't mine. It was someone else's, someone who knew me, who had been waiting for me. The cat's purr stopped. The room was silent. I stood there, my hand still trembling, my breath shallow, my mind screaming. I could hear my own voice, but it was not mine. It was something else, something that had been waiting for me, something that knew me. The walls here were not walls anymore. They had swallowed the room whole, their surfaces now slick with a sheen of lavender, so pale it looked like the bruise of a forgotten god. My fingers brushed the texture soft, almost tweed alive, like the skin of a peach left too long in the sun, split open but still clinging to its shape. The air smelled of storm clouds, thick and electric, though no rain fell. My breath came in short, uneven bursts, each exhalation a betrayal, a sigh that might as well have been a coin dropped into a slot. The cat sat on the floor, its form a slow-moving storm of smoke, thick enough to choke on. It didn't blink, it didn't breathe. It simply fought. Unraveled. My laces one by one, the threads loosening with a sound like wet silk being torn from bone. My boots slipped. The floor beneath me was not wood. It was sunteeth, smooth and white and wrong, arranged in a grid that shifted when I looked at it too long. I stumbled forward, my hands outstretched, and the cat's purr filled the room. Not a sound, but a vibration, a low, rhythmic hum that rattled my teeth and made my fillings ache. The bowl sat in the center, ceramic but warm to the touch, like a living thing. The water inside didn't ripple. It didn't boil. It twin-breathed. Steam curled from its surface in slow, deliberate spirals, each one carrying the scent of old tea stains, of damp wool left too long in a closet. The static hissed in my ears, a voice forming from the noise. "Your turn." Not spoken. Felt like a needle pressing into my skull, unraveling my thoughts before they could form. I mimicked a sigh, just a breath, shallow, deliberate. The bowl swai leaned toward me, the water inside darkening, thickening, like ink in water. The cat's purr stopped. The room went still. Then the water moved end, not in waves, not in currents. It tweet reached, tendrils of liquid stretching toward me like fingers, cold and insistent. My boots were untied. My balance was gone. I fell forward, hands outstretched, and the water met my skin. It tasted of rust and old paper, of something twin-known and hungry. The bowl tweepul date, not with suction, not with force, it tweet quality. And my body answered, my fingers sinking into the liquid like it was honey, thick and clinging. The static screamed now, words forming and dissolving in my mind. Your turn, your turn, your turn. The cat smoke, fur rippled, a slow deliberate wave, as if it were laughing. I opened my mouth to scream, but the water filled my lungs before the sound could leave me. It burned. It had tasted of old tea stains, and then darkness. The water in the bowl was a living thing, thick as syrup and black as a drowned man's veins, pulling at me like a current. My lungs burned. No, my throat did, raw from screaming, from trying to drag in air that smelled of wet wool and something older, something buried. I kicked, but my legs were lead, my boots sinking into the liquid's grip like they were melting. The static hissed in my ears, a chorus of whispers, each one a sigh, sigh of the silent. Sigh of the forgotten, sigh of the ones who never left. Then, the tunnel, not the bowl, not the room. The tunnel stretching ahead of me like a throat, its walls lined with faces, dozens of them. Hundreds pressed against the damp stone, their mouths open in silent screams, their fingers clawing at the air. Their skin was the color of old parchment, stretched too tight over bone. Their eyes hollow pits that drank in the light from nowhere. They didn't move. They didn't breathe. They just watched. Watched, their chins trembling with the weight of something unsaid. I choked on a sob, half laugh, half scream, and the water fought a laughed. With me, not a sound. A vibration, a shudder that traveled up my spine made my fillings rattle. The faces in the tunnel leaned closer. Their lips didn't move, but I heard them. Isaac. 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 Not a voice. A memory. A name carved into the walls of my skull. Something grabbed my ankle. Not a hand. A thing fingers too long, too pale, wrapped around my boot like a vice. I thrashed, but the water held me fast. My struggles just ripples in its endless dark. The static screamed now, words dissolving into the hiss. Your mimicry is exquisite, Isaac. Not spoken, felt, the collector's voice, smooth as oil, sliding into my mind like a knife between ribs. I opened my mouth to scream again, but the water filled it first. Not liquid, not air. Fufund, the faces, the sighs, the weight of every breath I'd ever stolen, every word I'd ever swallowed. It tasted of rust and old paper, of something unknown and hungry, and then the tunnel trimmed with me. The station smelled of mildewed linoleum and the faint acrid tang of old cigarette smoke. Though no one had smoked in decades, I was sure of it. The tiles were cracked like the skin of a drying mummy, their edges jagged with time, and the flickering bulb above the bench cast a sickly jaundiced glow over the peeling advertisements. A woman in a corset smiling too wide, her lips painted the color of dried blood. The kind of place where the air itself felt like it had been bottled in 1905, preserved in a jar of static. I wiped the black syrup from my hands onto my trousers, the fabric stiff with dried grime. The phone in my pocket vibrated once, just once before going still. No signal. No battery, of course not. The tunnel had swallowed every ounce of light, every drop of sound, every last scrap of hope. I pulled it out anyway, fingers numb, and pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life, then died. Then flickered again, words bleeding across the glass like ink in water. Fee safe. Asterisk, the static hissed in my ears, a wet whisper. Safe, safe, safe. Safe, asterisk, I exhaled through my teeth. Safe, right? Because the faces in the tunnel weren't following me here, because the water wasn't seeping through the cracks in the floor, because the cat wasn't waiting for me in the shadows. The thought made my stomach clench. Then I felt it, the warmth of fur against my wrist, the rough texture of something not quite real brushing against my skin. The cat, of course, the cat. It coiled around my ankle, its body dense as smoke given form, its purr a low rhythmic thrum that vibrated through my bones. I didn't look down. I never looked down when it was near. You, we're supposed to be gone, I muttered. But my voice sounded hollow, swallowed by the station. Silence, the purr deepened, a sound like coins being shuffled across a table, each one landing with a quiet clink clink foosh. My phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen. My contacts list was gone. Not deleted, Tim faced asterisk. Like it had never existed. The static pulsed, Tim fee safe. Asterisk, and then the glass tin-fin cracked poos, a spiderweb of fractures spreading from the corners, not from impact but from something kinseedy. The phone, something pressing outward. I yelped, jerking back, but the cat's tail lashed against my leg, a whip of heat and pressure. The screen shattered with a sound like breaking glass, but not glass. Like Theophiboni. The pieces fell to the concrete, each one humming, each one T14 alive. The digits on the screen rearranging themselves into a single, repeating word, Footy Faith. Asterisk, I kicked the phone away. It skittered across the floor, the shards scattering like teeth. The cat purred louder, its breath hot against my fingers as it wound itself around my wrist, its body pressing into my skin like a second heartbeat. The station lights flickered, once, twice, and then the walls twin glowed, not with light but with something twin. Inside them, a pale, sickly hue like the underside of a bruise. The tiles pulsed, the advertisement switched teved. The woman in the corset, a smile stretching too wide, her eyes black pits of static. I swallowed hard. The cat's purr became a fusong, a melody of coins and whispers, and the word fusafi echoed in my skull, not from the phone, not from the static, but from the walls themselves, from the air, from the futhing. That had followed me here, the station was not safe. The station was never safe. And the cat was laughing. In the station, dim glow, I noticed it, a ledger, bound in worn leather, resting on an ancient bench, like some forgotten relic. My heart pulsed in my ears as I approached, each step echoing through the silent station. Thump thump, asterisk fun thump. Thump, asterisk the cat purred from its perch atop a rusted locker, its tail twitching like a metronome set to allegro. Its milky eyes seemed to watch me, though it could see. At least not in any way I understood. I reached for the ledger, fingers brushing against the cool leather cover. It was heavy, filled with pages yellowed by time and dampness. The spine creaked as I opened it, a sound like old bones complaining about the weather. The first page bore an inscription, the catalogue of Sigh. Beneath that, names, hundreds of them. In neat columns down either side of the page, dates followed each name, some recent, others dating back decades. And next to those dates, a single word repeated like a maddening mantra, Sigh. Asterisk, I turned pages slowly, carefully, as if they might crumble at my touch. Each one bore more names, more dates, more sighs recorded with clinical detachment. Elizabeth Martin, 1923, asterisk 3 Joan Doe. Unknown, and there in the bottom corner of a page filled otherwise with strangers, Isaac Nightingall. Present, asterisk my breath caught in my throat. Present? How could it be present when I was here alone? I looked up sharply, scanning the station for any sign of life beyond myself and the cat. Nothing moved except shadows cast by flickering lights. Back to the ledger, my name seemed fresh against the faded ink around it. The page felt warmer than those surrounding it, as if my sigh had not yet cooled. The static hissed in my ears again, fee safe, asterisk. But this time words formed within it. For sigh is priceless, sigh. They echoed through me like a chant from some ancient ritual. Sigh, is priceless. Your sigh is priceless. I flipped to the next page, and the next. Each one held more names, more dates, more sighs, but none after mine. Then I saw it. A blank space at the bottom of the last filled page, waiting like an empty grave. Beneath my name, a line had been drawn in red ink, the color of dried blood or rusted iron, and beside that, turfa collected. Asterisk, a chill ran down my spine, settling into the base of my skull like ice. I slammed the ledger shut, its wet snap echoing through the station. The cat's purr deepened, resonating against the tiles underfoot until they hummed with it. The sound of coins shuffling across a table, each one landing with quiet finality. Cling twister. I looked at my hands, they trembled. Not from fear, but from something else. Anger. No time for such luxuries. The smell returned then. Storm on the horizon, ozone and wet stone filling every corner of the station, until it felt like breathing underwater. And I knew the ledger wasn't safe here either. Neither was I. The podcast began with a hiss, static like a moth trapped in a jar, and my voice calm rehearsed, the voice of someone who had long since stopped believing in the words they spoke. The collector collects sighs because we fear being known, I said, my breath fogging the microphone as if the air itself were a living thing, thick with the weight of things unsaid. The cat sat across from me, its fur not like smoke, but like the residue of a fire that had burned for centuries, thick, oily, and wrong. Its purring was not a sound but a sensation, like the slow unraveling of a thread through the fabric of my skin. I leaned into the mic, my voice steady, even as the static hissed in my ears DC 5. I was not safe, I had never been safe, but I had to keep going. The script was in my hands, the words like a lifeline. We fear being known because we fear what lies beneath the surface. The cat pawed at the mic. I didn't see it at first, only the sudden fortuitous crack of the speaker breaking, the sound of something fragile shattering. The static surged, no longer a whisper but a roar, and in that roar, I heard my own voice, distorted, twisted into something I did not recognize. I am known. The words echoed through the tunnel, through the walls, through the bones of the earth itself. My hands trembled, but I did not look away from the mic. I could not. I had to finish the script. I had to make it real. The tunnel was dark, but I could see the edges of things, faint, flickering, like the afterimage of a flame. The air smelled of storm, of ozone and wet stone, and the static hissed in my ears, is safe. Hove. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My throat was full of something thick and unyielding, like the weight of 1,000 unspoken names. The cat purred again, its sound now a low, wet foot clink-tied, like coins falling into a jar. The mic was still in my hands, but it was no longer mine. It had become something else, something that pulsed with the same rhythm as the cat's purr, the same rhythm as the static. I looked down at my lips, and I saw them move, even though I did not speak. A drop of blood fell onto the mic, then another, then another. It was warm, and it tasted like copper, like the inside of a wound that had not yet closed. The static hissed again, "Fee safe." And then I heard it, my own voice, not distorted, not twisted, but clear and terrible. Sigh. The word echoed through the tunnel, through the walls, through the air, through me. My lips bled onto the mic, and the static formed words around me, around the tunnel, around the cat, around the darkness. Sigh. The cat's purr deepened, and the tunnel seemed to hold its breath. The static hissed, "T safe, he's safe," and I knew, in that moment, that I was not safe. I had never been safe, and I would never be safe again. I looked up, and the walls were pale lavender, not the soft, sugary kind, but the thick, congealed cream of forgotten milk left too long in the sun. My fingers brushed the surface, and the walls sucked, not with teeth, but with a wet, adhesive pull like honeyed tar. I yanked back, but the resistance was wrong, a slow, deliberate, fuddy schlick, as if the wall was digesting my skin. The air smelled of ozone and wet stone, that impossible storm smell clinging to the tunnel's throat, even though no rain touched these depths. My breath fogged the mic still clutched in my hand, a tiny cloud in the suffocating quiet. Then I saw it, the ceramic bowl floating just above the cracked tile floor, full of water the color of crushed violets. It wasn't steam, not really. It moved with a slow, petal-slow pulse, smelling faintly of pressed flowers and something metallic, copper tang beneath the scent. Lavender water, I thought, the word absurd in my head. Why lavender? The static hissed, a low thrumming in my molars, and then it coalesced, twin your sigh. Not the static's usual whisper, but a clear, breathless word formed from the white noise, dripping into the hollow space behind my ribs. I couldn't move. My throat was full of that same unyielding weight, the 1,000 unspoken names, but the static pulled at it, shaping the sound into the word. I felt the air thicken, the pastel lavender pressing inward, the walls breathing. The bowl's surface rippled, reflecting not the dim tunnel, but my own face pale, wide-eyed, lips parted in a silent, perfect sigh. The water wasn't still. It was moving, fun sighing, the reflection mirroring my own mouth opening, the same desperate, hollow exhale. My own face trapped in the bowl. Sighed back at me. The static hissed, "Foot safe." Her word was gone, dissolved into the bowl's surface. I saw my reflection's eyes, the same eyes I'd seen in childhood celebrity photos. Too big, too knowing, now filled with the quiet horror of being seen. The walls didn't just close in, they fupped. The lavender light deepening into bruised violet. The texture of the wall now clinging to my forearm like wet gauze. I could feel the pressure building, a slow, wet feedback as the pastel nightmare sealed around my bones. The bowl's water surged, the reflection's sigh echoing louder than the static, a sound like the slow unrolling of old paper. My hand, still pressed against the wall, felt the suction intensify, the lavender paste seeping into my skin, cold and thick. I couldn't look away from the bowl. My reflection's lips moved again, silently, forming the word I'd been too afraid to say. The tunnel's darkness wasn't empty anymore. It was full of sighs, each one a tiny trapped breath, rising from the bowl and the walls and the air itself. The static formed the word once more, softer now, almost gentle, Funyo Sigh. And the walls pressed closer, the lavender light swallowing the last inch of my vision. The reflection's sigh merging with the sound of my own breath turning to static. The bowl was full, the water still, my face still sighing back. The walls closed in.